Angeles, ABC Sports presents Monday Night Baseball. At Dodger Stadium, the Cincinnati Reds and the Los Angeles Dodgers.
This ABC Sports exclusive is being brought to you by Budweiser. For all you do, this Bud for you. By Chevrolet. See today Chevy, drive today Chevy, live today Chevy. By Gatorade Thirst Quencher. Gatorade is thirsty for that deep down body thirst. And by United Airlines. You're not just flying, you're flying the friendly skies.
Hi again, everyone. I'm Al Michaels. Welcome to Los Angeles. It's 100 degrees at 5 o'clock in the late afternoon, and the Reds and Pete Rose are about as hot as the weather. This very proud franchise had reached the depths in 1982. The Reds that year lost more than 100 games for the first time ever, finished last. In 1983, they finished last, and the fans stopped coming to Riverfront Stadium. Last year, wallowing around again, and then the brilliant move made by Bob Howsam at that time to bring Pete Rose back, not only as a player, and it's well known that, barring injury, he will eclipse Ty Cobb's mark this year for most career hits, but brought him back as a manager as well. And all of a sudden, the fans are back. Interest is back in Cincinnati. Rose is on his way to eclipsing Cobb's mark and maybe leading his team to a pennant, because right now the Reds are only 4 games back. They're in front of the Dodgers, who trail San Diego by 5. Let me turn now to Jim Palmer, and let's talk about the Los Angeles Dodgers. 5 games back, and what you think in terms of their future with 3 months remaining in the season. Can they win it?
Well, I guess they can, Lee. They seem very optimistic. We came in here a month ago. They weren't catching the ball. They weren't hitting very well. They're still not hitting, with the exception of Pedro Guerrero, 15 home runs in 1 month in June. But the one constant the Dodgers have is their pitching. It's going to keep them in ball game. It's done it all year. They're, I think, last in extra base hits in the National League, so they are used to playing the one-run games. They're used to winning the close ball games, and they've tightened up their defense. So they're very optimistic. They think they have a chance to win, and they're hoping a guy like Mike Marshall, who's on the disabled list, will come back and be able to give them some extra power. He won't be back for another 10 or 15 days.
Generally, it's felt this division is not as strong as the East. What do you think?
Well, I think the dominant team in the National League is the San Diego Padres, but what they've done is not be able to pull away. And you have 2 teams that we're going to see tonight, both Cincinnati and the Dodgers. Cincinnati only 3 back in the loss column, the Dodgers only 4, that think that they can win. And San Diego really hasn't been able to pull away, and they've allowed them to have that sense of optimism.
Of note this week in baseball, the trade of Alan Wiggins from San Diego to Baltimore. Many of you know the story. Wiggins, drug troubled, had been suspended by the Padres earlier this season. Ballard Smith, the president of the San Diego club, said he would never again play for San Diego. Lived up to that word. He is right now playing at Rochester, will rejoin the Orioles shortly. And earlier, Howard Cosell talked to Oriole owner Edward Bennett Williams.
Bringing Wiggins back probably this Thursday for the start of the Kansas City series. Public pressure, as you know, will be utterly enormous. Why? Because Wiggins was refused by Ballard Smith, San Diego owner, a place on the San Diego team. What are you going to say in the face of what the public press has already said?
Well, I don't plan to answer what the press has said. I don't even know really what they've said, Howard. But I believe that the boy deserves another chance. I spent a lot of time with him. We did a very deep analysis of his case. We had experts look at it. I think it's a risk, but it's a risk we're willing to take. I've spent all my professional life believing in the redemption of the human spirit and reformation and in the revolution of character. And I intend to take that risk with Alan Wiggins.
In the meantime,
I think it would be a very sad thing if we excluded him from baseball. I think you have to look at it as though you had a member of your own family who had this problem. You certainly wouldn't rule him or her out of your family. You'd keep a light in the window and hope that it turned out well, and that's what I'm hoping here.
How does this square with Commissioner Ubrot's mandatory drug testing procedure desire? Will you mandatorily, or will he submit mandatorily to drug tests?
Yes, he has said he will. And I don't think there's anything inconsistent. I think that what we're doing is perfectly consistent with the drug rehabilitation program that's part of the collective bargaining agreement between the players and the owners.
Well, more pressure will come upon you because I talk to you now from Dodger Stadium, as you know, and Steve Howe has been placed on the restricted list, he having vanished for slightly more than a day. No statement about him that would indicate that he's had a relapse, nor do I judge that he has had. But what about the additional public pressure from the Howe case?
Well, I think that's unfortunate. I hope to goodness that he hasn't had a relapse. I hope that his absence is explainable by reasons other than a relationship to drugs or narcotics. But if it is explainable that way, then it's very regrettable. That won't deter us from placing confidence in Alan Wiggins' rehabilitation. We're going to cast that vote of confidence. We're going to give it to him. I think he will deserve it. I'm satisfied that he's learned his lesson. I'm satisfied that he realizes that he made a bad mistake. I'll have to agree with you in the implications from your questions. I can't understand how, in the name of reason, a professional athlete who's blessed with a great body can tamper with narcotics and take the risk of destroying it. I agree wholeheartedly with the implication of your questions.
Thank you very much, Ed. I've got to cut it off. Maybe the day will come when you'll once again see your team beat the Yankees. Thank you.
Well,
Meanwhile, at Dodger Stadium tonight, there's your pitching matchup. Jay Tibbs in his second year with the Reds, and Oral Hershiser, 7-2 for L.A.
Batting order for the Cincinnati Reds. Gary Reedus leading off. Eddie Milner batting second. In the third spot, the player-manager, Pete Rose. Having a terrific year. Batting fourth, Dave Parker. Then Alan Nicely, the catcher. After him, Dave Concepcion, veteran shortstop. Then Wayne Krenchicki with sudden power at third base. Ron Oster at second base. And finally, Jay Tibbs, the pitcher. Al?
Interesting little thing going on the field right now in the meeting at the plate. The Dodgers have called up Dennis Powell. He has just walked out of your picture. You can see Bill Russell, and Powell is trotting back to the dugout. But with Steve Howe on the restricted list, they call the kid up from Albuquerque, and Lasorda sent him out with a lineup card just to get introduced to those men. Lanny Harris back of the plate, Bob Engel at first base, Jim Quick at second, and Paul Runge, the umpire, at third. They tell us it reached 106 downtown today. Very low humidity, and you've been hearing and reading about the fires they've been having in Southern California, and that is one of the reasons. Very little breeze right now as the Dodgers now take the field before this late arriving crowd at Dodger Stadium.
Actually, my friend, I was at the Coliseum doing a piece today, and it was 104 then.
And then what was it when you went outside? Defensively,
In the shade.
Greg Brock at first base for the Dodgers. And at second base, Steve Sachs, who's doing a better job defensively, but not hitting very much. At shortstop is Mariano Duncan, the rookie switch hitter who loves to bunt. And the third baseman is Dave Anderson. Pedro Guerrero was at third until the 1st of June. And, of course, now he is very much still in the lineup, but in a different role. And there he is in left field. That's Guerrero in left. And Ken Landreau is the center fielder. Number 44. And around and right for the Dodgers is R.J. Reynolds. Mike Marshall is on the disabled list. He had an appendectomy and won't be back until after the All-Star break. Mike Socha does the catching, and it's more than a platoon situation, though Steve Yeager does see some action against lefties. It's Socha in about 80% of the time. And Oral Hershiser is on the mound. On our first Monday night game this season, you might remember he worked against the New York Mets in a game that wound up a 12-inning affair. And earlier, Dodger manager Tommy Lasorda talked about this brilliant young pitcher.
Outstanding ability. He has one of the finest sinker balls in the game today. Tremendous curveball. When you watch him pitch, if you see guys hitting balls on the ground, you know he's pitching a strong game. If they start getting the ball in the air, he's raising the sinker ball, doesn't allow it to have any sink to it, and he gets hit fairly hard. He's going to be one of the premier pitchers in baseball.
Scores this afternoon. There's Montreal's victory over St. Louis in a day game. In 10 innings, Lucas beats Horton, McGee, and Dawson with home runs. Andre hitting number 10. So Montreal over the Cardinals in the first game of that big series. Atlanta defeated San Francisco. The Giants have now dropped 11 of 12 with Zane Smith beating Krukow. And Suter, who gave up Guerrero's homer yesterday, getting the save. The Yankees knocked off Toronto back at Joe Cowley. Righetti saving it. Mattingly a home run. 4-1 over the Jays. So here we go at Dodger Stadium now in the late afternoon with Gary Reedus to lead off for the Reds. Reedus, Milner, and Rose. Reedus, in his third season with the club, has tremendous speed. Pete Rose thinks outside of Vince Coleman, he could develop into the premier base fielder in the National League, and he rips it down the line and left just foul, 0-1.
There's a perfect example of what Tommy Lasorda said. Started him out with a sinker that didn't sink. Reedus, an excellent fastball hitter. The type of guy, and it seems like about 6 weeks ago, Pete Rose said, let's copy the Cardinals. They have two guys, Vince Coleman and Willie McGee, getting on for Tommy Herr and Jack Clark. Let's put Reedus, who was sitting on the bench, let's put him in left field and start him, and Eddie Miller after, and get him on for Rose and Parker. And they've been scoring a lot of runs, second in the National League.
And the Reds have won 5 of their last 6 as he looks at a strike, and the count is 0-2. When spring training started, Rose decided his outfield would be Cesar Cedeno in left, Eric Davis in center, and Dave Parker in right. Well, Cedeno's being platooned, and Davis is in the minors, and Reedus has just struck out. So Gary has gone on 3 pitches. 1 out in the first inning, and Eddie Milner will be coming up.
Center fielder.
Looks like a sinker right down the middle of the plate, 93-mile-per-hour sinker. So you get an idea of the velocity that Orel Hershiser has. Tough time to see, Al. This is, if you're a pitcher, you want to be out there. Light standard is just about covering the pitcher's mound. Twilight. Hard to pick up the spin on the ball.
And even though it's just about the longest time of year, maybe 10 days past the longest day, it's going to get tougher too. At least the entire field right now bathed in sunshine as it's hit down to Brock, who is able to juggle and still recover to throw over to Hershiser for the out. So they keep Reedus and Milner off the base paths, and Pete Rose, 38 from a tie and 39 from a clutching Ty Cobb, comes up.
You know, there's a way to win at this ballpark. Hit the ball down. That little dirt spot in front of that dirt area in front of home plate, you can play ping pong off that if one remembers the 1981 World Series. Drove the Yankees crazy, the Dodgers did.
Well, George Frazier lost 3 games throwing his sinker. They just hit those high hoppers. Took advantage.
Pete Rose getting more cheers than boos as he comes to the plate, taking low. And of course, in his 40s now, there is a certain sense of appreciation that did not exist a few years back. Rose grounds it to the right side, and Brock is there to handle this one. So 2 plays go into the books 3-1 after the strikeout of Reedus. And after a half, it's the Reds nothing. And the Dodgers coming up.
We've already mentioned that Steve Howe has been placed on the restricted list, vanished for more than a day. Earlier, I talked to Tom Lasorda about what action has been taken and how long will it last.
Well, as of now, he has been put on the restricted list. How long he will remain on that list is something that I don't know, and the ball club will come out with a decision on whether he's to remain on the restricted list or what's going to happen to Steve.
Is any inference to be drawn that he has returned to either drugs or alcohol?
Well, this is something we can't say right now, but certainly we're all in awe at what has happened. We don't know why this young man hasn't shown up. We don't know why he hasn't come to the ballpark. For what reason? No one knows. We up till the other day, Howard, he's been doing great. I spent a lot of time with him on the road. We eat dinner. He's been doing great. Now we don't know what has happened.
At third base, Joe Malpatano.
And as we said earlier, the Dodgers have called up for the moment Dennis Powell. to replace Howe in the bullpen. Anderson, Duncan, and Landreau with Guerrero, Brock, and Reynolds. Then Socha, Sachs, and Hershiser for the Dodgers. Against Jay Tibbs, 4-9, missing outside to Anderson.
Kind of looks like a mismatch when you look at Jay Tibbs, 4-9 against Hershiser, 7-2, but Tibbs has a lot of ability. One of his problems is getting behind the hitters, and an illustration right there, starting off 2 balls, no strike. Has all the pitches, had a great rookie year, 6-2 last year, but has been struggling as of late.
He also missed his last turn. He was supposed to pitch last week against the Giants. He was running in Riverfront Stadium the other day, sprained his ankle. So he's on the mound for the first time in 10 days. In there for a strike, and the count is 3-1. Anderson hitting in the leadoff spot. They have dropped Sachs. They flip-flopped the two, and Anderson draws the walk.
Well, you don't want to walk a guy to lead off the game who's hitting 195, but Tibbs did.
Number 25.
What Pete told me, Jim, was that
Mariano Duncan.
Tibbs' greatest talent is that his velocity fools the hitter, that it comes in much more swiftly than the hitter views it is coming in.
Well, he's very deceptive, and as Pete also said, he's one of these gifted young pitchers that come to the major leagues, being able to change speeds, has the good arm, which you indicated, with a fastball right around 90 miles per hour, but when he gets behind, he can change speeds, throw his curveball, his slider, and his changeup. Right now, you just see him high and out of control.
Duncan squaring the bunt that time, looking for the sacrifice. Duncan loves to bunt. As a matter of fact, he's bunted a couple of doubles over infielders' heads this season, and Lasorda says that Duncan has promised him a triple before the year is done.
Well, a natural right-handed hitter, and what he's doing, Al, is taking advantage of his abilities. He works it on batting practice. The last 3 or 4 pitches, he will just take kind of like a swinging bunt, try to hit it over the third baseman's head.
And Krenchicki's playing in. The pitch is very high, and the count 2 balls and no strikes. So Tibbs, after walking the first man, has fallen behind, and of course he has Landreau on deck, and after Landreau comes Mr. June, Pedro Guerrero. 15 home runs in the month. Duncan taking, and the pitch is up high for ball 3.
It's courting disaster to fall behind Hershiser because the man has been an incredible young pitcher. Were it not for the fact that Dwight Gooden has become the pitching prodigy that he quite apparently is, Hershiser might have been getting the very raves that have been placed on Dwight Gooden.
Well, if you talk to the hitters, he's getting raves every time they mention his name, because we talked about the great sinker and the slider. Jay Tibbs, and you talked about that 10 days of inactivity, Al. One of the most difficult things is to take 10 days off and not be too strong, not have much of a command of the strike zone. And there we see.
His control has hurt him this season as he loses them on 4, and that's 8 of 9 that have missed the strike zone as the Dodgers get runners to first and second with nobody out, and Ken Landreau is the batter.
44. Center fielder.
Landreau got off to a terrible start this season. He's picked the average up, and he's in the lineup in center field against right-handed pitching. Again, the Dodgers are minus Mike Marshall in right field as they rework the outfield in his absence, and it's in for a strike.
But note Landreau, Alfalfa, has only 17 runs batted in on the season. He's not been hitting at all when it matters.
And that has been the Dodger tale this season. They have not been getting the timely hits, not getting the hits with 2 outs. Landreau, it's a fly ball to shallow center field, and it's Milner coasting in to make the catch. So runners at first and second as Landreau trying to advance the runners. And here comes Guerrero.
15 homers in the month of June. Remember when Duke Snyder hit 15 in the month of August in 1956, Jim? You were around.
I was, but I was only 10 and rooting for the Yankees.
Well, the calendar may have turned a page, but right now Guerrero stands in thinking it is June 31st. With runners at first and second and 1 away. And the pickoff play as Tibbs throws back, and in the dirt is still able to get him. Anderson was so fooled and so off balance that Tibbs was able to turn in an unorthodox way, bounce it down to second base, and still get him.
What a different light that puts on this inning.
Kind of an unusual play because with Guerrero up 15 home runs, as both you and Al have talked about, where would you be going? Certainly don't want to run yourself out of an inning, and that's exactly what Dave Anderson did.
All of a sudden, now 2 down and Duncan at first base. Guerrero tied with Dave Kingman for the major league lead in homers, and a wild throw by Rose, and there's plenty of room in foul ground here as Duncan will go to third. And at Dodger Stadium, when you throw wild to first, chances are the runner will wind up at third base. The only problem there for L.A. is that it opens first base now, and Tibbs can work around Guerrero.
Well, I talked to Pedro about that. I said, it's obviously they haven't pitched around you that much. You hit 15 home runs, but Greg Brock, who bats next, said that they've walked Guerrero twice intentionally to get to him. He's come up with 2 hits. Again, you have to make a decision.
So many have said he's begun to hit when Lasorda took him off third and put him in the outfield. So I started a needle to him about that. Finish the score in a minute.
And it gets by the catcher nicely, and Duncan comes in to score. Anderson almost ran the team out of the inning, and then all of a sudden the throwing error, and now a pass ball, and it's 1-0.
You talked about that deceptive fastball, threw it right by Nicely. Of course, Nicely has only been catching for about 4 or 5 years. Probably his best position would be third base or possibly first base.
He played first very well.
Type of guy that you have in the lineup, not for his glove, but for his bat. There we saw an
home run
illustration of
power
that.
nicely. But
1-0 pitch to Guerrero is low for ball 2. 2-0 the count.
finish what I was saying a minute ago, Al. I said to Lasorda, you had to have been managing wrongly. Still another ball. To have had Guerrero at third. He said, look at it another way. I had him at third 2 years ago, and he had more than 30 home runs, and nobody said boo.
And they won a division title.
Mm-hmm.
And that's inside for ball 4. So Tibbs has walked 3 of the 4 men he has faced. Only man who's hit the ball is Landreau, who flied out. Dodgers lead 1-0. And Greg Brock is the batter. So a walk, a throwing error, and a pass ball. 1-0 LA, and Brock with 11 homers, but only 23 RBIs. The Dodgers have hit a lot of home runs this season, but about 80% of them with the bases empty.
But this kid's got quick hands, quick swing. He's a good hitter with the power already suggested by the 11 home runs. But even that's a little deceptive. Had a hot streak in June, hit 4 home runs in 10 days, drove the Mets crazy with a spree at Shea Stadium.
And he's been warm of late, as the graphic illustrated. 2-0 the count. Nicely will go to the mound, and the great thing about being a player manager is that you can go to the mound as well from your spot at first base.
Of course, in this situation, you would almost think that Jim Cott, the pitching coach, would come out, and there you see the little hit of encouragement. Pete's probably saying you got to throw the ball over, which is a fairly important point. And I'm sure Tibbs is trying to do that. Again, if you take 10 days off, it's not easy to throw the ball where you want to.
Now Krenchicki goes to the mound, and that buys more time in the bullpen, where I believe it's Ron Robinson who has gotten up to start throwing.
That's who Pete told me would come on the minute Tibbs gets in trouble.
And the plate umpire, Paul Runge, had indicated that that was a trip to the mound for Pete Rose as a manager, as it's fouled back. And it counts 2-1.
That's interesting, isn't it? The first baseman goes over, but he's the manager. Now it's a trip to the mound.
Guerrero at first with 2 down. And the 2-1 pitch is ripped into right field for a base hit. Dave Parker up with the ball as Guerrero goes to third. Runners at first and third with 2 down. 1-0 Dodgers, and R.J. Reynolds, the switch hitter, will come up.
Well, you get behind the hitters and you have to come in. Like we said, Brock's been on a hot streak, gets a fastball down and in, which is where he likes the ball, and drills it to right field.
And he doesn't have a cheapie up at the plate. Reynolds has been the Dodgers' best hitter with runners in scoring position, .316 average in that regard, and pretty good out in the outfield. He's played all 3 outfield positions this year.
Pitch to Reynolds is taken for a strike. 0-1. Here it is, the 1st of July. These two teams play in the same division. They have met once this season. They would have met 3 times, but they were rained out twice in Cincinnati. Still, it's a crazy schedule when you think that the Reds have played the Giants 14 times with 4 to go, and they played the Dodgers once with 17 meetings remaining over the next 3 months between these two teams.
You were on the scheduling committee, weren't you?
No, but your buddy Chubb was.
Chubbaroo.
1-2.
You mentioned the restricted list before and the fact that Steve Howe is on it. Technically, to get him off the restricted list, should that be the Dodgers' aim, permission must be gotten from the Commissioner of Baseball, Peter Ueberroth. One wonders about Peter's position in that regard in view of his mandatory drug testing procedure desire.
Next line just foul outside third, so it's still 1 ball and 2 strikes.
But again, I must emphasize, no inference to be drawn against the pitcher, Steve Howe. Not in this country, anyway.
Well, that's not supposed to be the way it is. You'd think they would give him the benefit of the doubt.
Two balls, 2 strikes, the count. Well, the problem now is with all of the attendant publicity, not just about Steve Howe or Wiggins, but generally speaking over the last 3 years, the inference is drawn even when it's not remotely connected. Base hit to right field. And Guerrero scores to make it 2-0. So Tibbs starts throwing strikes, but the Dodgers start whacking him to right. RBI 21 for RJ.
The catcher.
Another fastball right in the middle of the plate, belled high down the middle. Howard talked about Reynolds being able to hit in the clutch. He got a good pitch to hit, and he hit it.
2 down, 2-0 Dodgers, and it would really be a big inning as you see Robinson still warming, or Pastore, Frank Pastore right in the bullpen now. As it's up and away, ball 1, 1-0.
Pete obviously decided it was too early for Robinson.
You know, you're probably right, because we were talking to Pete before the game, and he says if I need a guy in the 2nd inning, it's going to be Robinson. But he didn't say anything about the 1st, so it's Pastore. 2-0 the count. Mike Scioscia looks at a strike, and the count 2-1. Brock.
Tough ball
and
player.
Reynolds.
Scioscia, tough ball player.
Well, another Dodger contact hitter. Doesn't hit a whole lot of home runs, 4 or 5 a year, but
as Al and I learned when we did.
That's chopped toward the middle, and Concepcion has to back up and throw to first, and he gets him. The Dodgers are done here in the 1st inning, but they come up with a couple of runs, 2 hits, lead 2-0, and we'll be back after this message and a word from our local stations.
I'm Al Troutwig in New York. This afternoon in Toronto, the Yankees and Blue Jays tied at 1. 2 outs, top of the 8th, and Don Mattingly sends this Doyle Alexander pitch over the right field wall. Yankees go on to win 4-1. Let's go back to Al Michaels in Los Angeles.
And we can tell you that at Wimbledon today, McEnroe and Lendl won. So did Chris Everett Lloyd and Pam Shriver.
Yeah, but look at the upsets. Armitage defeating Yannick Noah, and Becker putting away the Swedish player, Nystrom. Different story for the Swedes on grass.
Here in L.A., we go to the 2nd inning with Dave Parker having a terrific season leading off. And in the women's division, Hannah gets beat, and Wendy Turnbull loses as well. Dave Parker taking inside. Parker reborn when he was traded from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati. In his second year now with the Reds, playing in his hometown and having a great season. Chases an off-speed pitch, and it's 1-2.
And there you saw a great curveball, the one that Hershiser has. Parker, amazing, took off all the weight. Last year hit 16 home runs, already has 14 this year. Talking to Coach Billy DeMar, said he was down there with the pitchers and the catchers the first day of spring training, about really a week early, working hard.
2-2 the count, and he's become a big favorite in his hometown. It wasn't that long ago, a couple of years back, people were questioning Parker's ability, questioning Parker's enthusiasm. Takes that one, and down he goes again. So Hershiser keeps it down, takes something off it, and gets a second K.
This, as I said, is not a pitcher you want to get behind. Examples, twice in the early season against the Padres, whom Jim said looked to be the standout team again in the National League this year to you at the beginning of the telecast. Twice he beat the Padres, a one-hitter, a two-hitter. That kind of achievement had not been accomplished since Lon Warnke did it. Jim would remember vividly back in '39 with the Cubs. You remember Lon Warnke, the Arkansas Hummingbird.
1-0 pitch in there for a strike.
Another one of my favorites, Howard.
Arkansas Hummingbird. I thought that was Frank Broyles.
Could be.
Alan Nicely at the plate. One out and the base is empty and fouling it back. Alan Nicely last year in the minors, playing mainly first base, DH some at Wichita. Started this season at Denver. In his first 21 games with the Reds, hitting .321, and he's tailed off. But he was brought up from the minors because the Reds were getting zero offensive productivity from their catchers. 2-2.
That was 93 miles per hour. This is a very well-spoken young man, Hershiser.
2-2 pitch. Breaking ball, low, ball 3. Full count.
Very literate, carries his success thus far in his career very, very well.
Well, he's had 35 starts and 7 shutouts, so that means every 5 times he pitches a shutout. Rather good pitching. The first game, we saw him make an excellent play over his head. He also hit a double to aid his cause.
And that's called strike 3 on the inside corner. Lanny Harris, to the disbelief of Nicely, and Hershiser has rung up 3 strikeouts.
See for yourself. Nicely thinks the ball's inside, and it might have been, but again, a good fastball is one that moves. That ball ran about 6 inches. Might have even fooled the umpire.
3 strikeouts, 2 groundouts, and the 5 putouts thus far. Concepcion, aging now, but still efficient.
In his 16th season, takes a strike. One of those few players now who has made a career of playing with one club, top to bottom, as did Johnny Bench. A strike.
Key home run for Dave. Al in the All-Star game we did in Montreal a few years back.
1982, he not only hit the home run, but as it turned out in a low-scoring affair, wound up winning the MVP award because of it. 2 out, bases empty, Dodgers on top 2-0. Concepcion was having major offensive problems early this season and started muttering about retiring. He wasn't all that serious, but it got a lot of publicity. Fouled away, and it's still 0-2.
And last year wanted to be traded. He was playing a little bit of third base, wasn't the regular shortstop. It seemed when Pete Rose came over, of course, he had seen Concepcion play at his best, put him back at shortstop, and the results kind of speak for themselves. Not only playing well in the field, but also with the bat.
1 ball, 2 strikes. That C on his jersey on the left shoulder denotes captain. He was named the captain of the team, of course, before Rose came back to manage. So Pete still bestows that title upon him, but there's little doubt who the leader of this club is, on and off the field. And he hits him right in the C. So Concepcion becomes the Reds' first base runner with 2 out in the second inning.
Dave looked at Hershiser once when he was hit, and another time walking down the line, but obviously no intentional hit there. Last thing in the world he wanted.
Well, unless you're a batter, you have no idea how that hurts. Where you want to pitch, Concepcion is up and in, but not that far up and not that far in.
This kid is not without interest. He played 6 years in the Orioles system, accumulating only 91 Major League at-bats during that time. Traded to the Reds in '82, played a little more than a year with the Reds. They traded him to Detroit, and he comes back here, and he's hitting home runs now.
Wayne Krenchicki, he's platooning at the moment with Nick Saski. And Krenchicki's been hot. He's 11 for his last 24, and in good measure, very much responsible for the Reds winning 5 of their last 6. In the air to left center field, where Landreau and Guerrero come together, and it's Kenny making the catch to retire the side. At the end of 1.5, it's LA 2, Cincinnati nothing.
Jay Tibbs, Reds pitcher, gave up 2 runs in the first inning. Must see if he can settle down. Rose characterized
And batting eighth, number 3, second baseman, Steve Sachs.
And it was a mechanic problem. And now he's back on beam. So he throws the ball a lot harder than you think. He's not a very big stature type guy, but he throws the ball real hard. He's got a good slider, and he's got a good changeup. And hopefully he'll throw strikes tonight and pitch a real good ball game, because I think he surprises the out hitter with the velocity he does have on the ball. And he's a very confident kid. He's a good kid. He knows what his capabilities are, and we just try to get him to stay within himself.
He had a lot of trouble throwing strikes in the first inning, walking 3, giving up 2 runs. And here the count, 1 ball and 1 strike on Steve Sachs. Tibbs in the first inning threw 29 pitches, 18 of them for balls. Steve Sachs struggling long, 229. They dropped him from 1 to 8 as the Dodgers continue to get very little productivity from the infield. 2-1.
Well, if Steve could throw the ball instead of hit it, he's made it clear nobody can catch whatever he throws.
2-1 pitch is high. Well, at least he's remedied that problem, which plagued him a couple of years back. His fielding much improved. But all of a sudden, Sachs, who was in the lineup in the past for his bat, is now in for his glove more than anything else. 3-2 the count. What the Dodgers really need, though, is another infielder, and they've been looking. Probably to play third. 3-2 pitch is popped up, and it's Rose with Oster, and the second baseman makes the catch.
Perfect example right there that Sachs swung at a ball out of the strike zone. If he takes that pitch, he goes down to first base.
Well, that's what we got next week, Jimbo. Where you going to be?
I want to be in Cincinnati.
Where you going to be?
I'm going to be in Cincinnati. Where are you going to be?
I'm going to be in Cincinnati.
All right. And the other game is Milwaukee against California. And that Angel game, for those of you in Southern California with tickets, will start 15 minutes earlier than is printed on the stub.
Cincinnati has become not only a hotly contending team, but one of the most interesting teams and cities in baseball. They've got a lady owner named Maud Schott, who is at once effusive, tough-minded, absolutely dedicated. She is terrific.
1-1 pitch is taken low, ball 2, 2-1.
She does a commercial on television in Cincinnati that is really funny. She has this big St. Bernard dog that she loves named Shotzi. And she does the commercial with Pete Rose. And Pete, as we look at another called strike, ends the commercial, Alfalfa, by leaning over, patting Shotzi, and saying, "Can Shotzi hit?"
2-2 pitch to Hershiser is fouled away. Well, she took over the majority ownership of the team last year. Bob Howsam was still the president up until, I think, in fact, today was the first official day of Bob's retirement, even though he was honored at Cincinnati in a recent ceremony. But Bill Burgish is the general manager as it's hit foul down the right field line. But there's little doubt that Marge Schott is relying in good measure on the man who plays first base for her ball club.
There is no question. She has a very deep-seated affection for Pete Rose, for his personality, for his drive, for everything that has made him one of baseball's all-time respected figures.
Tibbs asking the plate umpire Harris where it was as he goes 3-2 now on Hershiser. So with 1 out and the bases empty, the 3-2 pitch to his opposite number is lifted in the air to shallow center field. And Milner takes care of it for out number 2. And to the top of the order, and Dave Anderson.
Don't underrate either, Al. Bill Burgish as a baseball man. He's been around a lot of years. Like Bob Howsam, a disciple of the late Branch Rickey. And when Maude Schott went to George Steinbrenner to ask about Burgish, A, his availability, B, his knowledgeability, George said there is no question that this man knows the business inside out, particularly great at player evaluation, but make sure that he's tough enough.
Anderson, the batter, taking low on the count, 1 ball and no strikes. 2 out, bases empty. Dodgers on top 2-0 in the bottom of the 2nd inning. Anderson drills it to deep left field, sending Reedus to the track and gone. Homer number 3 for the Dodger third baseman.
Once again, Tibbs struggling with his control. It gets behind Anderson. Fastball right in the heart of the plate, uncharacteristically, because Anderson's mostly a line drive hitter. Crushes it.
You don't expect a home run from Anderson. If there was one thing Rose wanted from Tibbs tonight, it was Tibbs to keep his team close. A 1-run ball game.
Duncan chops it out in front of the plate and nicely throws it out. And the Dodgers take a 3-0 lead on the 7th home run of Dave Anderson's career as we go to the 3rd. And tonight we'll keep you abreast as to what's happening at the Meadowlands in the Baltimore, New Jersey game. As Oster leads off by grounding down to Brock, who picks up his 3rd assist as the play goes 3-1, and Oster is gone on the first pitch in the 3rd inning, with Jay Tibbs coming up.
Only Wayne Krenchicki has hit the ball in the air thus far for Hershiser. He hasn't been striking out. Everything else was a ground ball. And that shows in his whole record. Lasorda talked about it to us. Jim has mentioned it. But Hershiser has a ratio of 2.7 ground outs to 1 flyout, which is terrific in Major League Baseball.
Well, that's why when he's pitched over 100 innings now, only 3 home runs, so you get an idea that they're not hitting the ball in the air. Not too many inside the park home runs on grounders.
1-0 pitch is a little chopper to the left side. Hershiser fields and throws him out, so another ground out as Hershiser, a good fielding pitcher, takes care of that one. If Hershiser doesn't get the ground outs, he's not going to beat you, because the other night in San Diego he got it up. So when you say a sinker ball pitcher gets it up, it's just a little bit up. That's all it takes.
That's the very ratio I just mentioned.
And he gave up 6 runs in 6 innings the other night against the Padres, whom he had 1 hit and 2 hits.
Also, the thing that makes him really tough to hit, you talk about a sinker ball pitcher like Tommy John. Tommy John, even though he was an excellent pitcher, never had the velocity that Hershiser has. We're talking about a guy that's throwing 93 miles per hour. And you're up at home plate, you don't have a whole lot of time to make a decision whether that ball is a strike or a ball. And a lot of times you end up swinging at balls. Makes it even easier to get the ground ball.
Now the fleet Reedus, who has Anderson playing even with a bag at 3rd, hits it in the air to left field. Guerrero goes back and has a play on the track to retire the side. 3 hitless innings for Hershiser, and after 2.5, it's still 3-0 Dodgers.
The great Guerrero on deck. The figures reflect the June he had. Here is Tom Lasorda talking about that month.
Howard, he has been unbelievable is right. Awesome is the word I use. I haven't seen anybody put on a demonstration of hitting like that in all the years I've been in the major leagues. And he's just put his name in the record books with some pretty good people like Babe Ruth and Duke Snyder and those kind of guys. I tell you, he's really carried this ball club. It's something that we needed so very, very much. And, buddy, I'll tell you one thing. He is tough to get out right now.
And he'll follow Landreau, who leads off in the 3rd. Dodgers on top 3-0 as they seek their 3rd consecutive win. Landreau flied out in the 1st, batting .239. Start of play today, Padres on top, Reds 4 back, Dodgers 5 back. So L.A. could move into a tie for second with a victory.
We talked in the pregame about that I think the Dodgers could win. Kenny Landreau right here is the type of guy that Tommy Lasorda has used in the third role, third batting slot almost all year. For them to win, he's going to have to get hot.
Popped up, and Concepcion is there to make the play. Not only get hot, Jim, the funny thing about Landreau, he could be out of the lineup. When Marshall comes back, definitely Marshall in right, Guerrero in either center or left, and the other spot, you've got Landreau, you've got Al Oliver, whom he wants to get in, you've got R.J. Reynolds as well.
You know what's interesting? It doesn't seem that long ago that Landreau had that tremendous hitting streak, consecutive game hitting
34
streak.
games.
That's right.
31
31, excuse me.
Foul back by Guerrero. Guerrero hitting that 15th home run in his last at-bat. If you did not read about it yesterday, he won the game in the 8th inning, came up with a man on, and hit it off Bruce Sutter. And that, by the way, snapped despite his blazing month, what had been at that point an 0-for-14 streak.
Well, he talked about that. We talked last week when we were in New York. Don Baylor, one of the great, and there's a good breaking ball from Tibbs. Really the first good one he's thrown all night. He talked about the great streak hitters. Another look at the curveball. Guerrero kind of fishing for it. Pitcher's pitch. I saw Reggie Jackson when he played for the Orioles in '76. I think hit 8 home runs in 9 days. And what happens is you take yourself out of the hot streak by expanding the strike zone.
And Guerrero's strike zone that time was not big enough as he goes down on a pitch from Tibbs, recording his first strikeout with 2 down in the 3rd. It's particularly tough now, as you can see the shadow line extending between the mound and the plate.
You say Reggie hit 8 home runs in 9 games for the Birds?
An awesome streak.
I didn't realize that. Only one guy has done better than that. You remember who that was?
Dale Long.
Yes, but the last place Pirates in 1956 hit 8 in 8 games. Nobody had ever done it before. Nobody's done it since.
Once caught a game left-handed. 1-0 pitch. In for a strike.
That was a Rickey experiment that died. American League scores. Yanks won. Seattle, Chicago tied. Detroit leading Baltimore. Gibson and Evans homered.
Here in L.A., it is now 95 degrees, so it has cooled off. It got up to 106.
And you
downtown.
see, excuse me, Al, you see the Angels leading the Rangers. Boston, Milwaukee, early stages, as are the other 2 games.
1 ball, 2 strikes to count on Greg Brock. And that's fouled over toward the Cincy dugout. So still 1-2 on the Dodger first baseman, the man who had to fill Garvey's shoes a couple of years back after a sensational minor league career. He has just not gotten there yet. He can get hot. He can help you. He can help carry you for a few days, but the consistency has been lacking to this point in his career. Hit down to Oster, and Tibbs appears to have settled down now as he's retired 7 of the last 8, and we go to the 4th with L.A. ahead 3-0.
I'm Al Troutwig in New York. At Memorial Stadium, the awesome power of Kirk Gibson once again on display. His 17th in the 3rd to give the Tigers a 4-0 lead. Larry Herndon has another to make it 5-0 in the 4th. Back to Al Michaels in Los Angeles.
And here at Dodger Stadium, we go to the 4th inning. Dodgers on top by a score of 3-0. Reds still looking for their first hit, and Eddie Milner to lead off in the 4th. Rose and Parker to follow. Eddie Milner running up to bunt and taking low and inside, ball 1.
That's tough for Earl. He just thought he was getting his pitching untracked.
Mike Boddicker with a shutout yesterday in Fenway. Something not very easy to do.
But Boston getting shut out 3 times at home this week. Hit in the air to center field, and Landreau makes the catch. 1 away, and Pete Rose comes to the plate, having grounded out in the 1st inning.
Well, at least they're hitting flies now.
Pete Rose.
Freitas hit 1. Milner hit 1.
Funny thing, you walk into the Reds clubhouse. For years, we've been walking into the manager's office.
Gloom.
Various clubhouses, and the manager should sit there with a pot belly and a lot of tobacco stains on his shirt. This guy, of course, has 2 batting gloves and a helmet.
Well, we talked to him, what, for 15 minutes? Did he ever put the bat down? Did he ever stop swinging?
Never. I've known Pete for a long time, and I've never seen him without the bat in the clubhouse.
Wayne Krenchecki was talking about his game-winning single yesterday afternoon in San Diego. He said it was similar situations. You couldn't see the ball. Goose Scotchy's on the mound. He steps up, 2 strikes, single to left field to win the ball game. Utterly amazing. Talking about leading by example.
The 44-year-old wonder with a count 1-1 takes low for ball 2. By the way, if you're wondering if this will be Rose's last year, maybe not.
Nope.
He's going to get the record, but if he keeps hitting the way he is, he'll be back. He's liable to beat Cobb by a mile before it's all over.
He told me that today. I said, are you obsessed with this Cobb record thing? He said, no. Going into the year, well, we may get that in. Our producer, Chuck Howard, may find time to get that in, so I'll hold the rest of the story on the premise that he can.
2-1 pitch is hit to left field, and another base hit for Pete Rose, and now 38 to break the record.
And the crowd roars its approval.
At one point, the fans here were as hard on Pete as they were anywhere in the National League. He's turned them around.
Well, he's become a contact hitter. That's a pretty good pitch. Just goes right with it. See it fall safely for a base hit.
And as is customary, they have thrown the ball out of the game. It is now in the Reds' dugout, and they'll keep each and every one until he passes Cobb.
Lasorda really laid it on Rose as the two were bannering before the game. There's Dave Parker having the great season we've already discussed. He said, you know, Pete, I'm the one who said you were going to be in this pennant race this year. Everyone laughed. And Pete said, we're going to win it.
Parker swings, and it's a grounder to the right side, fielded by Brox, who goes to Duncan, and not in time to Hershiser.
Said we're going to win it. Tom says, no, we're going to win it. You wouldn't do that to me. You'll finish second. You'll be manager of the year, and I'll win everything. I've already been manager of the year. I've got your interests at heart, Pete. And Pete just looked at it.
The second out on a force, and Nicely is the batter with Parker at first base. The one thing that is getting lost in the shuffle this year is how good a manager Rose is, because everyone around the country is consumed, if you follow this sport, with his pursuit of Cobb, as Nicely grounds it to the left side, and Anderson goes the short way for the force, and Hershiser quickly disposes of the Reds in the 4th inning. But Rose gets their first hit. It's still 3-0 L.A.
This ABC Sports Exclusive is being brought to you by Bud Light. The best has a taste all its own. Satisfying but never filling.
Al Michaels, Howard Cosell, Jim Palmer, Dodger Stadium. In the first inning, Duncan walked, went to third on a throwing error on a pickoff move by Tibbs, scored on a pass ball. And then Reynolds drove in the inning's second run with a single to make it 2-0. Dave Anderson accounted for the other Dodger run with a homer into the left field pavilion in the second. It's 3-0 L.A. 3 runs, 3 hits for the Dodgers. No runs, 1 hit, and 1 error for the Reds. R.J. Reynolds to lead off, and then Mike Scioscia and Steve Sachs against Jay Tibbs, who has settled down, retiring 7 of the last 8 men he's faced. And he starts Reynolds off with a strike. Jay Tibbs out of Birmingham, Alabama. 23 years old. Another strike. 0-2.
Well, we're looking at a different pitcher. Earlier saw the graphic about how he scored the runs. He got behind everybody. He got behind Dave Anderson when he homered. Now he's doing what he's supposed to do, which is to get ahead of the hitters and then establish his breaking ball.
And the 0-2 pitch. Reynolds swinging late, loops it down the line, and that is just foul. Paul Runge there to call it, and it's still 0-2. This telecast presented by authority of Major League Baseball may not be reproduced or retransmitted in any form without the express written consent of Major League Baseball.
That Reedus is quick, Jim. He gave that ball a good go.
Well, one of the best base stealers in baseball. Not known for his defense, but he can go get the ball. Doesn't have an outstanding arm. Interesting thing, I was talking to Jim Cott about the young pitching staff he has here in Cincinnati. There was a perfect example. He said they don't throw the fastball enough when they get ahead of the hitters. Tips got 2 strikes on Reynolds. We went with a curveball. He said he can see it happening to Dave Parker. They throw him 2 high fastballs. He barely nicks them. They come back with a breaking ball, base hit. Best pitch in baseball is the good fastball, and he's trying to instill this in the young pitchers like Jay Tips.
1-2 pitch. He took something off it, and what a play by Rose. And listen to the crowd.
The crowd loves it.
Well, you're looking at a guy that's going to be known for about 4,200 hits. That's about as fine a play as you can make. Are those the reflexes of a guy that's been in the big leagues 23 years? Absolutely amazing.
Just another little stint in a day's work. Socia.
Mike at the plate, 1 out, base is empty. Crowd is responding to the replay of Rose's play. Forget Cooperstown. He belongs at the Smithsonian.
Good line. Socia, great at the tag play on the plate. Story I was talking about before.
Here's Rose, and this one's routine. 2 out.
Remember the Atlanta-St. Louis playoff series? One more look at the great play first.
Second baseman, Steve Suggs.
Pete, the only man in baseball history playing over 500 games at 5 different positions.
Bruce Benedict had failed to make a play at home. And you'll remember, Tom, outspoken as always, said, "Good Lord, Socia makes that play easily." We got to Atlanta, and there was almost a lynch mob waiting.
Well, that was also the series in which Lasorda said Benedict would finish second in a race with a pregnant lady. So you're right. We needed some protection for Tommy. Fouled away in the count, 0-1, and there he is.
The interesting thing was, you'll remember, we went to lunch with Tommy, and who'd we bump into but Bruce Benedict, and he thought that the whole thing was funny, and he has a real affection for Lasorda.
When you go to lunch with Lasorda, you go all day.
In any town.
The 1-1 pitch is taken high, ball 2.
And you've got to like pasta.
For breakfast as well.
Lunch, supper, midnight snack.
2-2. Lasorda may hold the world record for carbohydrates. I'm convinced of that after that week.
You'd think he's on the eat the win diet, but that's not the case. There he is, of ample body. That's right.
He's calling out now for a pizza. Quick delivery to the clubhouse.
Hold the anchovies. Down to Oster. And 1 second baseman throws out the other. That's 10 of the last 11 set down by Tibbs. Still 3-0 Dodgers. Back after this message and news headlines from your local station.
Mr. Hustle deserves every rave he gets. Asked him before the game if he was obsessed with the Cobb record. Here's his answer.
Not at all. I think it's fun. I think it's fun because, see, when this season started, Howard, I needed 95 hits to surpass a legend. And I didn't really set out for 95 hits because I had, matter of fact, I set a record last year of 22 years in a row of 100 or more hits. I have never in my life read about a player having a good year with 95 hits. So it's not like the day after I get my 95th hit, I'm gonna retire. See, I play this game for 2 reasons. 1, I still have fun, and 2, I still can play. And I don't know how long that's going to go on. When you get my age, you take them every game as it might be your last game. Hopefully, I'll do a good enough job this year where the team will want me back as a player next year. Hopefully, I'll do a good enough job as a manager this year where they want me back as a manager next year. But there again, if the press and the TV and radio people are going to make a big deal about Ty Cobb, I'll cooperate with them because it is a lot of hits. I mean, I'll talk about it if you want to talk about it, but it's not an obsession with me. Getting base hits is more important to me because that's my job, especially when I'm hitting third. And there again, I hope when I get the base hit that beats the record, it's a game winner.
Pete Rose in pursuit of Cobb as Concepcion leads things off in the 5th with a count 2 balls and 1 strike.
Well, Chuck Howard said he was going to get it in. He did.
Pete's a fascinating guy, and talking about his obsession, what people consider to be his obsession with statistics. Grounded to short. Duncan backs up. Concepcion does not run like he used to and is thrown out easily. So 1 away, and Krenchicki's the batter. The thing about Rose, they went up to him earlier this season when he'd hit his first home run in a couple of years, and they said to him in the clubhouse, well, Pete, what do you remember about your last homer? And Rose was getting sensitive to this obsession talk, and he says, I don't remember it. And somebody said, well, it was in 1982. Pete said, yeah, it was on the 3-0 pitch. Told him who the pitcher was, what the weather was. Krenchicki, the batter.
Worst day in his life was the day they benched him in the World Series game in Philadelphia.
1983.
He really...
It's the game that I won, the third game.
That's right.
Hard to believe. Went with Tony Perez instead of Pete.
That was the year they had started benching Pete in certain situations down the stretch, and the Phillies were still able to pull it out in a weak division. And they sat him down, did Paul Owens in Game 3 that night.
Well, it's a classic example. When you have a bad year when you're Pete's age, or 38 or 39, your career is over. If you have a bad year when you're 27, you've just had a bad year. They begin to doubt you. You begin to doubt yourself.
Now, that's a very sage statement. Once they begin to doubt you, you begin to doubt yourself. That happened to you, didn't it, Jim?
Well, it did, and I think we talked many times. You kid me about Earl Weaver, but Earl never doubted me. I think if he was managing last year, I would have had more opportunities.
2-2 pitch. Ball 3. Some people were doubting you as far back as the rotator cuff injury before anybody knew what a rotator cuff was.
Not Earl. He started, Jim, in the final game, pinning at stake against Milwaukee.
What a bad decision that was.
Turned out that way.
Yeah, certainly did.
Krenchicki lines it to left center field, but Guerrero comes in and, fighting the shadows, makes the catch. Not that easy a play with the ball coming out of the brightly lighted seats, which are still bathed in sunlight, back of first.
Oh, he's much more comfortable in the outfield. In fact, I think Lasorda made the move on our first Monday night game, put him out in center field. Yesterday, hit the game-winning home run, also made the game-winning catch in left center, doubled up the runner at second for the final out.
You see him just grinning out there? He loves it.
He said there aren't as many bad bounces. He said, I can work on my batting stance in the outfield. I couldn't do that at third.
Ron Oster, the batter, the Cincinnati native, the switch hitter who once stood in line to get Pete Rose's autograph when he was growing up in the Rhineland. Swinging and missing, and the count 1-1.
The Queen City.
Queen City, and that's where we will be. And there, a look at the shadows here and how difficult it is for the outfielders at this time.
Especially the right fielder,
of evening.
We saw that last time. Danny Heap, when we did the Met game, tremendous amount of trouble out there. A little bit like Fenway Park, Yankee Stadium, certain times of the year.
By the way, that final game against Milwaukee, it was Robin Yount who belted you, wasn't it?
Good pitch blown away, home run down the right field line. Dempsey comes out, he says, let's pitch him inside. I said, do you know how good a hitter he is? I pitch him inside, he hits it over the bullpen in left field. He was just better than I was.
Oster flies out to Landreau, and it's still 3-0 Dodgers in the middle of the 5th inning.
Al Michaels.
All right, thank you, Al. And here in the bottom of the 5th inning, Oral Hershiser is at the plate, and the count is 1-1 He leads off in the 5th. The Dodgers on top 3-0, and pops it up to Krenchicki on the dirt, 1 away. Jay Tibbs started the game by walking 3 of the first 4, committed an error, gave up 2 hits, but since the first inning, counting the final out of the first inning, he has retired 11 of 12. The only blemish created by this man, Dave Anderson, who hit one into the seats and left in the second.
Kind of the same pattern that's plagued Jay Tibbs all year. Early in the year, started out pitching very well, not too much support. Tonight, similar situation. Really, the only mistake he really made, other than being wild, was the pitch right here to Dave Anderson. Got behind him in the count.
And that was in the second inning. Meanwhile, Anderson bluffing a bunt here in the count, 1-1. Jay Tibbs, another of the Reds' good-looking young pitchers. They appeal at first base and don't get the call. Got a good-looking youngster by the name of Browning, Tom Browning, pitching well. Their bullpen has done a great job. Ted Power is beginning to get some acclaim, and deservedly so. Strike here, 2-2. So the Reds, after losing 100 games a couple of years back and finishing last 2 years in a row and then 5th, are right in the race. 3-2.
Little high.
We have to give a lot of credit to Jim Cott. Pitched, I think, in the major leagues 25 years. Tremendous competitor, knew how to pitch.
I enjoyed it when you said Cott was telling them, use that fastball as no pitch the equivalent of it. Jim should know. When was the last time he threw one?
Well, it's interesting because when I first came up, which was back in the middle 60s, Jim Cott was a power pitcher. But he made the change, the evolution of a power pitcher to a guy that kind of spotted it, threw the ball on the corners.
Mariano Duncan, the switch-hitting rookie, has taken over as the Dodgers shortstop. They pitch out, and if you're wondering, Rose does call the pitch outs. One and 0 the count. So even though Pete is not on the bench, he is still the man who pulls the trigger.
Yeah, but to a lesser degree when he's playing than when he is actually not playing and on the bench. You know the role Sugar plays on this team.
George Sugar is a longtime Reds coach. And Pete relies on George as an alter ego of sorts as the runner goes, and it's lined into the right field corner. And Parker will chase it down and get a break because it's touched by a fan for a ground rule double. And they will send Anderson back to third. And Anderson, since he was going, would have scored in all likelihood. And that is why LaSorda is going to argue with the first base umpire, Bob Engel.
The little round man goes.
It's the umpire's discretion right here. Now, you be the judge. They're going to call it a double on second and third.
Well, he made the wrong call because what the umpire has to make, and the decision he has to make, is if the ball was going to bounce into the stands or was going to go off the wall. And the replay clearly showed the fan reached over. Anderson would have scored easily. Once again, the one hopper looks like the ball is just below the railing. Fan reaches over, ball clearly in the playing field.
Now the umpires will huddle. The initial call was runners at second and third, and now the discussion between Lenny Harris, Bob Engel, Jim Quick, and Paul Runge.
Let me tell you, if they change the call, Rose will go in.
Sure.
Look at Pete.
Up until a couple of years back, it was automatic. It was a ground rule double, and they are going to allow him to score.
Pete had sneaked over to the group now.
So Anderson comes in to score to make it 4-0. And Pete, in his heart of hearts, knows it's the right call, but since it's a reversal, it's up to the manager to have his say.
Can't believe Duncan hit the ball that hard and that far.
Well, it's a situation where Jay Tibbs is a little bit worried about Dave Anderson stealing. Doesn't make a quality pitch. Duncan not known for his ability to pull the ball, especially from the left-handed side.
Rose wants to know who made the call and how he came upon it. That's Bob Engel, the first base umpire. Engel, I'm sure, said to him it would not have bounced over the fence. The runner was going. Paul Runge is the third base umpire, and it might have been Runge who cast the deciding vote on the jury, because it is Pete taking up his cause now with Runge at third.
Obviously doesn't like the answer that Paul Runge is giving him.
Now the second base umpire is brought into this as well, Jim Quick.
Difficult situation for a manager like Rose. He knows that in many cases a manager can be thrown out and it might even help his ball club, but in this case, as important as Rose is to the offense, he can't really argue as vigorously.
Not only could he be thrown out in a situation like this, think about a retaliation from a pitcher in a brushback sort of situation where the manager goes as well as the pitcher himself. Rose could take himself out of a ball game in that circumstance. Not that that applies right here, just as a point of information.
Please note that Dave Parker came in to argue the case, too. Yes, it's a different Dave Parker here in Cincinnati. One more look.
Center fielder, Ken Landreau.
Clearly, the ball would not have gone over the fence. That's easily established right there. And with Anderson going, little doubt he would have scored. He just didn't like the reasoning behind it. In any event, it's 4-0. Runner at second, 1 out, and Landreau, the batter, takes up high, ball 1, 1-0. Kenny has popped out and flied out, hitting .238. Dodgers and Reds, first of a 2-game series, and as we said earlier, only the second meeting this season. Second of 18 on the 1st of July. 2-0.
Interesting situation here. When Pete was talking about what he had to do as a manager when he was out on the field, he said a lot of times what George Sugar would do is give him his options. Here, with Tibbs, the first hitter in the inning, would like to have him get out of the inning without wasting a pitcher. On the other hand, I think one of the reasons he so vigorously argued, he knows that 4 runs and Orel Hershiger out on the mound, ball game may be over.
And also, he might have sneaked Tibbs by letting him hit had he gotten out of this inning in the 6th. But now you're down by 4, and you're compelled to bat for him. And so activity in the bullpen. Strike. 3-1.
The only way to beat Hershiser when he's right, and he's clearly right tonight, is to stay within 1 run of him and maybe get him in the late innings. Otherwise, you're a dead duck.
With Guerrero on deck, Concepcion scooting in back of Duncan. 3-1, the count on Landreau. In the bullpen, that's John Stuper and Ron Robinson. Tibbs is due to lead off in the top of the 6th. 3-2, the count. Told you about the Yankee victory. Seattle playing well of late. No score second at Chicago. Tigers lead at Baltimore 5-zip. Rangers lead the first place Angels 7-2 in the 3rd. Milwaukee leading Boston. Oakland, KC, no score. Cleveland leading Ray Miller's Twins in the 3rd.
That Milwaukee team is a troublesome team. They've got a lot of people who can hit on that team.
Landreau grounds it to the right side. Oster has to take a wicked hop and throws him out, and the runner goes to 3rd. You could see that hop coming. And at this ballpark, hops like that are commonplace.
Left fielder.
When we talked to anybody on the Cincinnati ball club, they said the most consistent infielder they have is Ron Oster. Knows it's going to be a bad hop, gets in front of it, keeps the ball in front of him. Not too far to first. The underhand throw for the out.
Duncan now at 3rd. Guerrero has walked and struck out, batting .294. Dodgers on top, 4-0 in the 5th inning. Got fooled, little half-swing grounder to Oster, and they get out of the inning. But the Dodgers on a ruling get a run, 1 hit, leave a man at 3rd. 4-0 L.A. going to the 6th. Back after this from your local station.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Back at Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles, Al Michaels, Howard Cosell, Jim Palmer. Nice cigar, pal.
Nothing like them.
Yeah, Palmer and I know every week.
Don't be bitter.
Oh, no.
It's already hot enough up here.
Tell me about it. 95 degrees in Los Angeles at the moment.
He trouble you?
Who? Whom?
More scores. Montreal over the Cards, Atlanta over the Giants. The Mets red hot at the plate these days, trailing Pittsburgh 1-0. Cubs leading Phils 2-1. Houston, San Diego, latest start.
And San Diego leading things in the National League West. Tibbs is out of the game. Max Venable to bat for him as we start the 6th inning. Venable called up last month from Denver. Used to be with the Giants. Utility outfielder, and takes up high, ball 1. Venable, Reedus, and Milner here in the 6th inning. The Reds have only 1 hit. Bat a 4th inning single by Pete Rose. 2-0.
This is the time if the Reds are going to get back into the game. It's funny how the terminology in baseball. Pete was talking about, what do you call the fastball? Dead red. It used to be the heater, whatever. Now they talk about the table setters. Venable could certainly be one of that, along with Milner and Reedus. Get on there for Rose and Parker.
Hershiser has done nothing to hurt himself tonight. Hasn't walked a man. He did hit man, though. Concepcion in the 2nd inning. And he has 3 strikeouts.
We got off to a great start when we were here on June 3rd. He was 5-0, 170 ERA.
Little squiver, and that's foul.
And then I was talking to Jerry Royce. I said, what's been his problem? He said he has so much talent that he's trying to even become better. He becomes a little bit too fine. Instead of just throwing that good sinker and the curveball, he's trying to even make it better pitches. And when you're 5-0 with and there we see Jerry Royce sitting next to the old veteran, Bill Russell.
I'd like to be as old as Bill Russell.
Well, he's only old in terms of baseball.
That's a half swing. They appeal, get the call at third. Runge rings him out. So Venable strikes out. That's strikeout number 4 in the first and the second inning. Venable is out number 1. You judge.
Another example of curveball. Gets ahead. Probably doesn't see it too well in the twilight. Can't hold up for strike 3.
Now Gary Reedus, the batter, struck out, fly to left. 4 runs, 4 hits for the Dodgers. No runs, 1 hit, and 1 error for the Reds.
Really, the only well-hit ball has been by Reedus. Got a fastball up in the strike zone. In fact, the first time up, just missed a double, hitting a ball a couple inches foul.
It's true. And the ball you were referring to before that, Guerrero caught against the fence. This guy is a great pitcher. Purposeful. I repeat, were it not for Dwight Gooden, quite apparently a pitching prodigy, this young man would be getting all the accolades.
Half swing and a miss. I think back to what Rose was saying when we were in the clubhouse today, Jim, as well, in terms of the difference in pitchers between when he first came up in the early 70s and now. And he said you had more hard throwers then. Now you've got guys who come in who look like they've been around for 10 years, and Hershiser is a typical example.
Well, any count he can throw his curveball. I believe in almost 4,000 innings. I never threw a 3-2 curveball. This guy does it every day. Has a fastball, same kind of velocity that I had up in the 90s. It is an illustration. The one thing we talked about in the pregame show is that the one constant the Dodgers have had, and you have to give Ron Peronoski a lot of credit, is that their pitching staff has kept them, even last year when they were struggling, they had all the injuries. Their pitching staff has kept them in the ball game.
Called strike 3. Reedus is gone. That's number 5, and it is very tough to see at the plate right now. The
Center fielder
hitter's background is in bright sunlight, everything else in the shade.
Well, they call this in baseball terminology. It looks like a backdoor curveball, one that doesn't really spin that well. It just kind of hits the inside corner.
Now we've got Milner. This game is moving right along. You might get home earlier than you expected, Alfalfa.
Now that you've said that, we'll be going to the top of the 19th inning very shortly. Milner takes high, ball 1.
This game, I'm afraid.
Well, that's what we said 4 weeks ago on a Monday night.
Well, the players think the same thing. I remember Cal Ripken Sr., who was the instructional league manager. You'd have a lead. You'd start putting the bats away with maybe 2 outs in the top of the 9th or even the bottom of the 9th, and all of a sudden he would start screaming. You don't do that because the game's not over till the last out, Howard.
No, it's never over till it's over.
Ball 2, 2-1.
I've heard that somewhere.
I know. Original phrases.
Except if you're the Giants, a lot of those games are over very quickly these days. Two and 1 the count. Outside, ball 3. 3-1 now on Milner. 2 out, bases empty. Hershiser has retired 7 straight. And 12 of the last 13.
Quickly, we could have a ball game. Milner walks, Rose singles, Parker homers, and it's a 1-run game. And we're ready for the 19-inning game. There's the walk.
There's the walk. All you need is a base hit. And the likely candidate for one coming up is Pete Rose.
Well, I think the most interesting stat that Pete Rose has is all last season he only walked 40 times. This year he's already walked 38 times. It gives me an indication that I think maybe last year he's a little bit anxious, wouldn't take the walk, was trying to break Ty Cobb's record. This year he knows he's going to have a full year. He knows he's the manager. He can play when he wants to.
And because of all those walks, crazily enough, in terms of on-base percentage, he's second in the league to Tommy Herr.
You believe the year Hurrah's having?
Well, they've wedged him into a pretty nice little lineup there, haven't they?
And this was the only hit of the game for the Reds. Hit the ball where it was pitched.
Rose hits it on the ground down to Brock. And they wind up stranding Milner. No runs, no hits, and a man left on. Still just one hit yielded by Hershiser. After 5.5, Dodgers 4, Reds nothing. The new pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds is Ron Robinson, who's done well in 13 appearances since his call-up. Unbeaten with a 208 earned run average. Called up on the 14th of May. So the big right-hander facing Greg Brock. R.J. Reynolds, Mike Socha to follow. Bottom of the 6th inning, 4-0 Los Angeles. 1-0.
And he is indeed big, 6'4", about 215 pounds. Basically a starting pitcher in the minor leagues. He's been used as intermediate man.
Next week we'll be in Cincinnati. Maybe the Mets will have some hits by then. Or Milwaukee against California.
3-0 the count. Ron Robinson, big, 6'4", 215, out of the northern California town of Woodlake. Up with the Reds part of last year, was 1-2. Brock getting the green light, and it's 3-1. And he's on. So Brock starts the bottom of the 6th with a walk.
Right fielder, R.J. Reynolds.
Robinson 3-0, and he's picked up those 3 victories in his last 4 outings. But he comes in here just trying to keep his team in the game.
Interesting little score. Al giving us the dope, reporting live from the USFL game. 13-0 first quarter Stars. As you know, Alfalfa, Stars had a first-rate football team, but have had trouble adjusting to the absence of a true home, playing in College Park. That team was put together, and it's found itself, when it counts most, by one of the smartest men in football, Carl Peterson, who was the front office man who put together the team that Dick Vermeil put into the Super Bowl back in '80. I think they're going to win the title.
1-1 the count.
Been a lot of talk in Baltimore about them playing possibly in Memorial Stadium if they get that far in the playoff situation. As you said, they aren't really the Baltimore Stars. They're the College Park Stars, University of Maryland.
That's right.
Reynolds fouls it away, and the count 1 ball and 2 strikes. R.J. Reynolds, one of those who will have to fight it out for the 1 vacant outfield spot as soon as Mike Marshall comes off the disabled list.
Well, he's hit for the high average, but has not hit a lot of home runs, and the Dodgers haven't been struggling. If you know you're a Dodger pitcher, you know you're usually not going to get too many runs. You're going to have to win the 1-run ball games, and a lot of times you make one mistake, it might mean the difference between winning and losing.
That one gets by Rose into right field for a base hit. Brock is on his way to third, and the Dodgers start the 6th inning with runners at the corners. Second hit for R.J. Reynolds.
Mota, M-O-T-A, Manny Mota, one of the great pinch hitters in the history of this team.
The ball right under Rose's glove, perfect example of a left-handed hitter taking advantage of that hole. Got a fastball inside half, just pulled it in the right.